We don't find it acceptable that it occurred, and we think the role of the media is particularly important.
How is it okay for your police force to be firing at unarmed Australian journalists?
Spare me your selective outrage, Prime Minister Karl Stefanovic, the Greens, and every other hypocrite suddenly condemning an Australian journalist being hit by a rubber bullet while reporting on the front lines of the violent LA riots. Because where were you when journalists right here at home were being targeted, arrested, shot and pepper sprayed at point blank range while covering peaceful protests for basic human rights? You know exactly where you were. You were cheering it on. Earlier this week, Australian reporter Lauren Tomasi was hit by a rubber bullet fired by the LAPD while covering riots in Los Angeles. And while the footage doesn't look great for police, the reaction back home has been nothing short of laughable from the Prime Minister down.
That footage was horrific. That was the footage of an Australian journalist doing what journalists do at their very best. We have already raised these issues with the US administration. We don't find it acceptable that it occurred, and we think the role of the media is particularly important.
And don't worry, the PM wasn't alone in calling for an investigation into the so-called horrific targeting of an Australian journalist just doing her job.
The incident was maybe one of three things. A moment where an LA officer so thought his life was in danger, he needed to discharge his weapon. An incompetent warning shot, or the act of a coward. Either way, it needs to be properly investigated. But how is it okay for your police force to be firing at unarmed Australian journalists?
Exactly, Carl. And where was that energy when it was happening on our streets?
He just comes at me and points it in my face.
They just started spraying everyone. There was so much media there, and I reckon so many people from the media just got sprayed. We were just covering what was happening and they just started spraying everyone.
I don't remember you or the PM coming to our defence, but now, just like the Greens, you're demanding answers. Well, last night on the Opposition podcast, Rukshan said what most Aussies are thinking and called out the hypocrisy better than I ever could. Have a listen.
We're talking about this outrage from an Australian Prime Minister about what's happened overseas to an Australian journalist, and okay, fair enough. He's the Australian Prime Minister and maybe he should raise these concerns. But what about when it happens to journalists in Australia, which had happened multiple times? And look, Albanese was not the Prime Minister, but I'm just saying in general, the whole overall gambit of all these individuals did not condemn what was happening to journalists here. And more broadly than that, Avi, moving on from journalists, because when I've talked about this issue, I've never really touched on the journalistic aspect of it, even though it did happen to journalists. Members of the Australian public, innocent people who were just walking down the streets of Melbourne, not burning cars, not looting shops, not doing any such destructive or violent activity, just protesting in a peaceful manner, was set on by Victoria Police almost at point blank range. Just like that, they fired these weapons into these people, hurting many of these people and maiming many of these people at the Shrine of Remembrance. 10 minutes before the police started firing at people like this, I was talking to people with families in strollers and their kids and all this kind of stuff. And then the Victoria Police, with these exact same weapons that they're so worried about that hit this journalist, Victoria Police indiscriminately, not even targeted like that particular police officer perhaps, let's say that. What is worth is indiscriminately started firing in to a crowd of Australians gathered peacefully at the Shrine of Remembrance, causing no trouble or harm to any of the police or throwing anything at them. So we have this double standard in this country where we have now a Prime Minister, the media class, calling for investigations about what happened in the United States of America because they are so anti-Trump, but they do not even care about what the police do to their own citizens in this country with the exact same weapons, hurting them to achieve their own political outcomes. These are the highest order of hypocrites. And we should have no respect for them. And look, I do care about what's happened to that journalist, and people call me a hypocrite for not making a big deal of it. But essentially, when it comes to my heart is with the people of Australia, and they did this to the people. I saw them do it. I saw them shoot innocent Victorians, and that has never been investigated. That is, no one's ever taken accountability for it. No Prime Minister in this country has ever stood up and said it was wrong to shoot innocent members of the Victorian public the way that we did for merely coming out into the streets and actually practicing their civil disobedience in a respectful manner.
Exactly.
So I cannot put those two things together and look at what's happened to this 9 News reporter and be like, oh, well, she deserves all this protection and all this sympathy and all these things from the press. She does deserve care or whatever, and look into the investigate it. But what about the rest of the Victorian population? What about Australians? What about Prime Minister, the people in your own country? When are you going to start caring about them and what your police and your thugs and your goons in the state, Labor officers of Daniel Andrews did to the people of Victoria? When are you going to give a shit about that? Because until these people talk like that, whatever they say at Meet the Press and talk about Trump and stuff, you shouldn't take them seriously. You should just call it for what it is. It's all bullshit. It's all theatrics. It's all their Trump derangement syndrome. And just let it be what it is and move on with your life.
If you think it's important the world sees these hypocrites for what they are, make sure to share this video far and wide. Then head over to my YouTube, watch the full episode from last night, like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a live.